Greetings everyone and welcome to the Dungeon Inn. I am the Innkeeper. Well, actually this is Gilgamesh. He's our new resident fluffball here at the inn, but I'm speaking through him as my familiar. Why? Because who doesn't love pets? And also look at him, look how fluffy and wiggle is, I love him so much. But also because that is the topic for today's video. We're going to be taking a look at all the options that exist for players who want to have a furry, scaly, or even gelatinous companion in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Unfortunately, despite how popular having pets is in D&D, the rules pertaining to them are kind of a mess. Most new players assume that in order to have a pet in D&D, you need to play a Beastmaster Ranger, because, well, it's called the Beastmaster, and it's the only D&D 5e class that gives you an animal companion as a part of your class features. But that's not actually the case. It's not officially written in any of the books, but there are actually 3 options for players who want to have a pet in D&D. 2 of these are available to players as per the player's handbook, but the third is, let's say it's a little more rules ambiguous. These 3 categories of animal allies are beast companions, familiars, and just general pets. The animal companion, or beast companion, is the specific pet of the Beastmaster Ranger and available only to that class. It has its own rules laid out for what it can and can't do, and functions very differently to every other pet in the game. Everything you need to know to run a Beastmaster Ranger and their pets is located right there in the class in the player's handbook, as well as the monster stat block, so it's very easy for new players to just pick up the book and learn how to run their monster. Your companion has its own personality and can fight alongside you in combat. It's basically like the Ranger and the Beastmaster together make one whole and complete character. They're designed to work in tandem with each other. The problem is that the Beastmaster is a hotly debated class and not all players are happy with it.
It's shit.
Like, before level 5, both you and your beast can't attack in the same turn, which, might be balanced, but it doesn't exactly make you feel like you're working together. It feels like you are sacrificing your usefulness as a player character in order for your beast to function. It's a big deal with action economy, where having even a single action in 5e makes you vastly more powerful, so having an entire other character or beast really unbalances the class quickly. If you boost up your beast too much, then it begins to overshadow your actual player character, and the 2 of you together overshadow the rest of the party. But if you don't boost the beast enough, then it just feels like the core Beastmaster. There are countless homebrew supplements out there trying to fix the Beastmaster Ranger and the Ranger class as a whole, actually, but this isn't a discussion about that, so I'm not going to get bogged down in that right here. If you want to play a Ranger, which I think is better, but still flawed, don't get me wrong, look at Unearthed Arcana for the revised Ranger that Wizards has put out. The other option for players who want a pet in D&D is to get a familiar, generally created by the Find Familiar spell. They can't attack, but they can do a bunch of other bits and pieces, like being able to channel touch spells cast by their master, or allowing their master to see through their eyes for a short time or within a certain distance. Familiars are pretty much exclusively the pets of spellcasters, though I guess anyone who can take the Magic Initiate feat can take Find Familiar. Warlocks actually have the best familiar in the game if they take the Pact of the Chain route. They get a couple of benefits, like being able to see through their pet's eyes no matter where they are on the same plane of existence, as well as getting a couple of upgraded familiars like imps and pseudo-dragons, and they can also attack, but at the cost of the Warlock's action, which is pretty much always better spent doing the one thing that Warlocks do best. The goblins run at you, teeth bared and swords drawn. What do? I Eldritch Blast. The shopkeeper rips you off and charges you double for your rations. I Eldritch Blast. The guard approaches you in a friendly manner and asks you if you're having a good day.
I Eldritch Blast.
But in the end, familiars are almost always more like tools than actual pets. Because they are constructs of magic and not an actual living, breathing animal, players tend to not really care all that much about them. They can be dismissed into a pocket dimension at any time, so they tend to just be like, and then they're there, they do their thing, and then back they go. Which isn't really what you want from a pet. There's no roleplay involved with that. Add on to the fact they could be summoned back just as good as new with a bit of gold, and there's no real threat for the familiar.
You're shit, Gilly. Your life means nothing to me. You're expendable.
It is worth noting that I do lump magical steeds like those created through the Find Steed spell in with familiars. However, because they can't be dismissed at will and they are, physically larger, so they're less easy to ignore, they are a bit of a better option if you do want to actually treat them like a pet. There is actually another type of familiar that is available to players in the game though. If you look up the monster manual entry for pseudo-dragons, you'll see that there is actually a little box with variant rules about running them as a familiar. This isn't as a warlock familiar though, this is if the beast decides that it wants to become a familiar of a player of its own will. In this case, the pseudo-dragon is more like an NPC deciding to join the party, and the rules for a familiar are listed there separate to the Pact of the Chain or any other class features you might get that will give you a familiar. Actually, what rules does a familiar get? Let me check that. Constant magic resistance? What?
Gilly, no, I'm sorry. Please come back. Give me magic resistance.
The catch is, because these familiars are more intelligent than normal ones, they are more like NPCs than they are pets. Their intelligence is above the threshold for what the D&D game system would deem a pet, which I believe is an intelligence of 3 or lower. These familiars have their own ideals, bonds, flaws, wants, needs, and have to be role-played like a proper non-player character. They can break their familial bonds with the player for any reason at any time. Which brings us to the third kind of pets you can have in Dungeons & Dragons. Just general pets. No magic involved, no specific class features, just a pet. The animal companion and familiar are the only 2 options available to players as per the player's handbook. If you want a general pet, then that is left up to the DM to decide and work out the logistics of. Say, for example, you wanted to play a crazy cat lady sorcerer and you had literally a dozen cats hiding in the pockets of your hempen coat. What about the horses that your party uses to get around? Or what if they decide they want to befriend a troop of ducks that are just waddling along in the forest? The core books don't really offer a lot of guidance on this. It's kind of left up to the DM to just wing it and say, hey, this is what's working. And it's one of the things that I feel is kind of lacking because the DM already has a lot of things to control within the game. The last thing he needs is to also be controlling all the NPC pets that your party decides they want to tag along. Has this ever happened to you? Okay, so the only way across the crevasse is this old rickety bridge. It looks like it can hold the weight of maybe a medium creature, but nothing more, so the ogre chasing you should fall to its death if it tries to pursue you. Hang on, what about Stampy? I'm sorry, what? My elephant Stampy, who we picked up a couple of sessions back, can't he cross? Okay, and just where has Stampy been while you were being pursued by goblins, tortured by ogres, and barely escaped with your lives? He was just watching from the bushes until I was safe. Of course he was, and the goblins just didn't notice this big-ass elephant hiding in the bushes. I rolled a nat 20 on your stealth check, remember? Guys, we can't use the bridge, we gotta find another way around. Fuck you, Stampy. And that is how my players conned themselves into getting a flying elephant. The obvious solution to this is to give control of the pets over to the players. Like, if the druid wants to befriend an entire flock of ducks, be my guest, but they now have to control the ducks and deal with the consequences of that. Unfortunately, the result is often the same, the players just forget about their own pets. And a large part of this, I believe, is because the pets don't have any sort of mechanics tied to them. There's no benefit to actually keeping them around. Sure, they can be good roleplay, but it takes a special kind of player to think in every situation, hey, I've got ducks following me around, how are they reacting to the city? What are they going to do when the guard appears? Playing pets is a roleplay burden, and always will be, there's no changing that. But I believe that by giving the pets something interesting to do, even just some minor benefits to the party, it will help to keep them interesting and remind the players that they actually exist. This is why the Beastmaster, for all its flaws, does succeed at making the beast an actual part of the player, and they can never really forget they exist. Like that duck example I was using before, the druid decides that they want to befriend this troop of ducks, but how do they actually go about doing that? Sure, you can use the animal friendship spell, but that only lasts 24 hours. Are you going to constantly be charming these ducks to come along with you? Or are you expected to roleplay with them in order to make them trust you when they decide they want to be friends with you? I think there needs to at least be a system for domesticating animals. Anything extra to that depends on your campaign. If you want to train a pet, it should realistically take weeks or even months or even years for you to do. Which, if you wanted to implement a pet training system, it makes sense to implement it as a downtime activity in your world. But I know firsthand that not every campaign is suitable to downtime. Sometimes you're just too busy going out and being an adventurer to take even a week off. So for DMs who might prefer a more immediate option, you could take a look at Insiders or Infiders, I'm really not sure how it's pronounced, documents on player pets. It introduces a loyalty score whereby making a series of animal handling checks over consecutive days will increase the animal's loyalty, and once it reaches a certain threshold, it will become trained. And if it's still too unrealistic or far-fetched for you to be able to train an animal that was once wild in only a couple of days, then consider demanding the use of the animal friendship spell or something along those lines. And now if you just want your pet to be a roleplay tool, you can just leave it at that, nice and easy. But as I said, players and DMs tend to forget about pets who don't actually do something, so we need to take a step further and figure out how to actually make your pet worthwhile. Usually, this means making them useful in combat, because combat is the most mechanics-heavy part of D&D by far. You as the DM or your players could just run the monsters in combat as per their monster manual stat block, but there is a couple of issues with that. Some pets like cats and dogs really just aren't suited for combat in the first place, and even if you do manage to get a pet like a panther or a bear that is at an early level good in combat, later on it becomes, useless. The answer, provided by the rule master Jeremy Crawford, painstakingly clawed out of him by insistent fans trying to find out what's happening with the ranger, is that you can add levels to your beast. Actual player levels, like as per the player's handbook. Basically make the creature a player. Yay? And I think I speak for the whole D&D community that when that information came out, and that was a solution if you wanted to have a pet that wasn't a Beastmaster, everyone was like, wait, what? The rules for adding class levels to a monster are in the Dungeon Master's Guide, chapter 9, I believe. But they are designed for adding it to monsters, not player monsters or pets. Like, were we just expected to know that as DMs? Like, yes, it is a good use of the rule and it is creative. I guess, Crawford, that's why you're the rules master. You can come up with stuff like that. But it really isn't laid out for new DMs anywhere. It's not accessible information. That being said, I do actually like the idea. Let the players run the pet like they would another character. Their proficiency increases, their hit points increase, so they scale just as well as any other player character. But unfortunately, this adds even more problems because adding class levels to a beast makes that beast exceptionally more powerful. They are basically a player character at that point. They can do everything a player character would. That is a massive power spike, and the DM will have to recalculate encounters around that. Like, how would you feel as a player if your friend's panther could do your job as a barbarian better than you can? You could run the pets as a sidekick using the Unearthed Arcana sidekicks rules, but even they are pretty powerful. Maybe for every 2 levels the players go up, the pet only goes up 1 level. That could be a way of stifling its advancement. Or it could not even be a problem depending on what class you pick. If the beast is only at level 1 when the rest of the party is at level 8, it doesn't really matter if they level up at the same scale because they're still going to always be significantly weaker than the rest of the party. But that is our best option. Add player levels to the pets and allow the players to run them, so that way they are constantly reminded that the pets exist and they feel like they're actually doing something. The pet feels like it's an actual part of the party. So yay, video done. Why are we still going? Because the completionist in me remembers about the Beastmaster Ranger. Adding class levels to a pet is a good idea, except for the fact that that pet then becomes more powerful than the Beastmaster Ranger's beast companion. The player and their new just general pet that they picked up are 2 separate creatures, which means they've got 2 full actions that that player can use, whether the Beastmaster and their pet are still fighting over the Ranger's 1 action. Even just in terms of action economy, it is clear that the pet is going to be better, which isn't really great for the Beastmaster. You don't exactly feel like a master of beasts when any other player can just pick up a pet and be better at the one thing your class does. The only real benefit to the Beastmaster is that their beast is tied to their class features, so it can't be taken away from them. Whether a pet that a player just picks up, the DM can always just be like, well, the pet wants to leave now, or just kill it in combat. But the assuredness of a pet isn't really worth taking a subclass for it, is it? Surely there's gotta be a better way. And the answer is unfortunately, no, not really. The best option I can say is use the Unearthed Arcana Revised Ranger, because once again, it is just straight up better than the core Ranger. The companion acts on a separate initiative to you and has its own action and attacks, so it basically is like the pets I was just describing, just functions slightly differently. There's not that much dissonance between a player having a pet and the Ranger's companion. My personal solution to this is a part of my changes to the Ranger class as a whole, which I'm sure I will get into on another video, but this video is probably already like 20 minutes long, so I'm not going to run into it here. If you want to check it out, it should be on the DM skill by the time this video goes up, and if you want to support us, drop us a couple of dollars, but really I'm just putting it out there because I like making D&D stuff. If you are looking for a more creative homebrew solution, I highly recommend checking out The Baby Bestiary by Metalweave Games. The Bestiary itself has 2 volumes detailing a baby version of pretty much every monster in the monster manual, from griffins to tarrasques. Not stats for all of them, mind you. Instead, it gives you a system by which you can pick a pet and pick and choose abilities that that pet gets as it levels up in the class.
A different solution that my friend Patrick came up with in our Tomb of Annihilation campaign is scaling the pet's abilities by age rather than with traditional levels. As the pet gets older, it develops more of its natural features, as well as granting some nice bonuses to the player who befriended it. Who I am like 95% sure is being charmed by this bird. Its name is literally Evil Ibis. Why have we not killed it yet? Because we were already tracking our days due to the ticking time bomb nature of the module, it wasn't any more bookwork than what we were already doing. It's an example of how creative and campaign-tailored solutions to problems can be fun and rewarding, and often more effective than the blanket fixes I've mentioned so far. A player and a DM should always work together to figure out what works best for them.
So after all this, where do we stand on the topic of pets in Dungeons & Dragons? It really depends on the tone of your campaign, what kind of system you want to use to run pets. If you're a very roleplay focused table and you just want to have pets there for flavor and for fun, then you can easily just introduce the training system that I mentioned, or whatever, wing it, just roll some animal handling checks. But I can almost guarantee you that unless your players are really strong role players, they're going to forget about the pets and it is going to cause problems at the table. Give control of the pet to the player themselves. Give them a physical character sheet to hold so they are constantly reminded that this pet is something they have and they are responsible for. Do whatever you can to make sure that in your minds and your players' minds, that pet is just as much a part of the party as they are. If your campaign is more combat focused, or you just want to use your pet in combat, talk to your DM about adding player levels or sidekick levels to them. Just make sure you're being careful with game balance, it just can become a little bit tricky. Also, if that's the case and you don't want to branch out into Homebrew, I highly recommend just disregarding the Beastmaster class. It just doesn't play well with this change. If you are okay with Homebrew, check out some of the other awesome options that are out there. I already mentioned a few in this video, but there are certainly more that I don't know of or I just didn't get a chance to mention. Whatever the solution is, I hope that you and your players can find a way to include pets in your D&D games. I'm the Innkeeper, and this is the Dungeon Inn. If you want to see more content like this, please subscribe, and if you really want to support us, head over to Patreon and drop us a couple of dollars there. We really enjoy making content like this here, and hopefully you guys are enjoying it too, so let us know what you think in the comments down below. You want to say bye again? You want to say bye again? Goodbye, the cat. Goodbye, the cat one.